Hi, welcome to the second video in this PHP video series. In this video, we're going to go over functions and scope a little bit. And I only want to go over scope because it will kind of help you out when you're working with functions. And I'll do my best to explain things. Functions are a little bit more difficult to learn, but once you learn them, they're extremely helpful and you'll be using them all the time. So once you learn this video and the last video, I think that's a really good, I think you'll have kind of a good start to get into PHP and going forward with it. So the first thing to kind of know about a function, let's see. So I made a web page here. I'll take a step back. I just made a web page. I uploaded it to my server already, and it's just blank, right? We just have the general layout of a HTML page within a PHP file, and I'll just add a header, just so we have something to look at, but it's not really going to be that important. Header, and then we'll add a paragraph, and there's a paragraph. So let's say you have a few variables up here, so I'll add some PHP, and we'll name one first name is set to Bob, and last name is set to Smith. Okay, so now we have a first name and a last name, both strings inside variables we just created. And if you don't understand this, please check out my last video. It definitely went over that a little bit. So hopefully if you look at the last video and this one, that should make a little bit of sense. And again, the reason we use variables in the first place is because we might not know what this is. We might not have just typed it in. It might be some information coming from a database or user input or something else. So the purpose of a function, I'm trying to think of a really easy way to say it. The purpose of a function is to have code kind of that not only that you can reuse over and over and generate similar, I shouldn't say similar results, but generate results based on the same criteria, is we can also pass variables into functions. So if we want a function named let's say we had a function named full name, okay, then we would pass the first name and the last name to it, and then it would return our full name to us. Okay, that's kind of how a function works. And the way we kind of make a function, the first thing to know about a function is you can put it anywhere on the page. You can put it at the very bottom, you can put it at the very top, because the way PHP works and the way your server works is it'll actually look at your functions first, and then it will kind of run your code. So even if your function's all the way down here under the HTML, that's completely fine because it will see that before it sees anything else. And so the way we make a function, we use the keyword function, and then we can name it whatever we want for the most part. You can't have spaces, you can't have hyphens. It'll have the same kind of rules that a variable has. So let's name ours first name, or no, what did we say? Full name or something like that. So full name. And then after our name, we have to add parentheses. And I'll explain kind of what goes into parentheses later on in the video. But you don't need anything inside the parentheses. However, you do need to add the parentheses after your function name. So if I made a function, and I'm going to add the curly braces here, this is the exact form of a function when you make it. And some functions you make won't have anything in the parentheses, and that's completely okay. So don't get too hung up on that. Just know that some stuff can go within the parentheses if we want to. So in this function, we're actually going to return a value, okay? And what we're going to return is, let's say, full name, okay? And we haven't made this variable yet, but we will in a moment. I'll actually make it a little different just so you can see it's not the same as the function. So full. Let me think of a better way to put it. How about whole name or something? So whole name. I just want to illustrate that it is different from the function name. Even though it doesn't have to be, you can make it the function name and that will be totally fine. I just don't want to confuse things. So did I already confuse things? I might have already confused. Sorry about that. So, and I also added the, what is that thing called? The semicolon, okay? I added the semicolon after this line because it is a statement, okay? And that's kind of the reason we didn't have to add it after the function is because we had the curly braces. So the curly braces is just saying like, hey, we have some more stuff in here, and anything between the curly braces, just like in HTML, anything between the opening curly brace and then the closing curly brace is considered to be part of that function. So if I highlight this, that's within the function because it's within the curly braces, the curly brace open, curly brace close. So we haven't made this variable yet, whole name, and we can do that in the function. So I can just make a whole name, and I can set it to, let's just set it to nothing for right now. I'll just set it to nothing, and then what'll happen is we declared a variable here, whole name, we set it to nothing, and then we return nothing. So that's not a very useful function, right? The way functions work is we can pass things to functions, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do right now, and I'll just kind of type it out, and I'm gonna do first and last, okay? And what these are, they're called parameters, okay? Functions have parameters and functions have arguments. When you're just starting out, think of those as the same, okay? I think it will only confuse things if you try to learn what a parameter is and what a argument is, because for the purposes of a beginner, they're identical. They're going to go in the same spot, okay? It's just something later on when you're actually learning how functions process things, it might help, but even me, I might mix up parameter and argument sometimes. I mean, if I do, just don't even pay attention to it because I'm talking about the same thing. It's just the stuff in the parentheses, okay? Just whatever's in the parentheses, that's either going to be a parameter or an argument. In this function, I made two parameters. I made first and last, and you can name this whatever you want. Okay, first, the variables first and last. It's going to correspond to our variables up here, first name and last name, but it's not going to. It's going to respond. Did I say respond? It's going to correspond to those variables, but it's not going to be those variables. So that might not make sense, but just don't worry about that too much. But just know that when we're making our function, let's just concentrate on this highlighted part. So don't worry about what we're going to do with it yet. And so I'm going to set this variable we made, whole name. I'm going to set it to first, and this variable corresponds to this variable, the one within the parentheses that we just made, okay? So it's going to be first, and I'm going to use the period, which is just the concatenation operator that just brings two things together. I'll add a space in there, so I have to add it's actually a string, it's just a space, and then another concatenation operator to kind of join it all together, and last, okay? And if I didn't add this, I know this might look a little confusing, the period with the parenthesis period. So what this is think of this like three parts, okay? The first part is this variable. The second part is this empty just space, and it is a space. I added that space in there kind of by design, right? It's a space. So, and then this third part is the last variable. And the way we kind of join them all together is just with the period. So we go period, parenthesis to close it, period, last. So, and then now when we return this whole name, it's going to return whatever we pass to the function here, and then whatever we pass to the function there. And this function has two parameters. And you can have a function with 100 parameters. You could have a function with 0 parameters. It all depends on what the function is for, okay? I'm still saying okay a lot. I'll try to get better at that. I think it's some kind of tick I got going on. But the way we kind of call this function, I'm actually going to do it right under the paragraph. So I'll make another PHP, open, close. And the way we call it is we just go, we just name it. So the function name is full name, and that's how we call it. And what this, actually I'll echo it because it returns a string there. So if I run this right now, nothing's going to happen that's too great for us because we didn't pass any arguments in where the parameters are down here, okay? So this takes two parameters. Where we call it is going to take two arguments. If you try to pass one in, you're probably going to have trouble. If you try to pass 3 in, you're probably going to have trouble. So we definitely need 2, and they're going to be separated by the comma, just like it is down here, okay? And so what we're going to pass to our function is this, okay? The two variables we made in the script. And since these variables were declared before we called the function, it's going to work. Well, I should never say it's going to work, but it should work, okay? So we're going to pass first name and then comma and then last name. And we could have put this in a different order if we wanted to. We could have passed the last name and then the first name, as long as it corresponds to our function. So if we actually did that, it would be reversed. It would say Smith Bob. Okay. I guess my point was the order matters. Okay, the order matters how you set up your function. This is the first, this is the last. These will be passed into it in that order. So the first one will be in this place. Second one there will be in this place. So let's go ahead and save it. And I'll just upload it and we'll kind of see where we're at here. There we go. And then I will. Okay, so it seemed to work. Okay, so that's pretty good. In the highlighted part there, I know it's really small. Let me try to make it a little bigger. There we go. So the highlighted part there, Bob Smith. Okay, so that actually went through the function and the function returned it. I know that was a lot of information. The main thing I want to show you though in this video is just how the flow kind of works. I don't expect you to memorize all this right away. I mean, I know that was total overkill, but the thing to note here is that anytime you place a function, anytime you call a function like this, just in your code, where you want to put it, anytime you want to call a function, just think of it like this. You have a function. You already made it down here. So think of it like this as you're starting out. The code's going down. Okay, it hit line 13. Now it echoes full name. It takes those two variables because we told it to, first name, last name. It goes down here, puts those variables in these spots, okay? And then it goes through the function. And then once it goes through the function, it's going to return something if we want it to. And in this place, we returned full name. So think of it like this. Think of this highlighted area for now just as full name, because that's where we returned it. Whatever it returned kind of takes the place of where you call your function, if that makes sense. That's not really exactly the way it works, but that I know when I started out, that was kind of helpful to me. Just say like, well, I want to have this here, but I don't want to have this big long function name with a bunch of arguments in it, because that's going to be kind of confusing. But if you just think of it like whatever result your function creates for you, think of that result as just echoing there. So that whole highlighted area, just think of it like this: echo Bob Smith, because that's the result you want. Okay, is the name. But the way we get there is with all that function, full name, and then we passed in first name. Oops. What do we do? First name and last name. Okay. And again, it's separated by that comma. That's how we separate the arguments, just like we separated the parameters. And the arguments and parameters have to match. So we have 2 there, and we have 2 up here. And yeah, so I know that was a lot of information. I'll definitely try to go slow as we use functions. The other thing to know is just know that PHP has a ton of built-in functions. And so we'll be learning some of those too. So you don't have to make your own functions all the time. Usually you only have to make your own functions. By your own functions, I mean this part down here. So when we're actually creating a function with our own name, you only have to do that when you need to, because if PHP already has something installed, you can just you can call the PHP function anywhere. You can call it you can call it anywhere in your code. The other thing to mention in this video before I let you go here is just there's something called scope in all programming really, but in PHP, the scope, just think of it like this, okay? If I make a variable above the function and I say whole name equals Karen Jones, okay, and it's the exact same. The variable I just made, right, is the exact same as this variable down here. This won't matter, okay? So this Karen Jones will never ever get passed into this function because it's outside of the scope of the function. So any variables we declare in the function, think of that as think of that as just within that function, and it does not affect anything else. Okay, it doesn't affect anything outside of it unless we call it. If we call it, then it goes through the variable. I'm sorry, it goes through the function and returns whatever we have it returning. So just keep that in mind, because that can get a lot of kind of beginners really confused, because it say, hey, I just made this variable, how come my function isn't finding it? And it's because it's not in the scope. It's outside of the scope of the function. We can access this variable all day long if we wanted to, and I'll show you how to do that in a later video. But not like this, okay? Not like just declaring it outside the function and then assuming it'll be available in the function, because that's not how it works. And just to illustrate that, what I'll do is I'll take this line out. And so this is still returning a whole name, but we never declared it. Let's just see what happens. I mean, I honestly don't know. So let's upload that. Yeah, it's blank. I'm pretty sure it worked, but it's blank because this never got passed into it. Okay, the line 19 there, it never got passed into it, again because it's outside of the scope of the function. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out my website, zlinko.com. Thanks. Bye-bye.